Hey fellas, how you doing? I recently finished the novel Death of Antagonis by David Annandale, and I don't know why it was so hard for me to say that in one take. And I have to say it was pretty good. It followed the Black Dragons, the supposed Salamander successor chapter. Since it's never really been confirmed, but it's also never really been contradicted in the lore. And I have to say, Mr. Annandale's work has fostered in me a new respect for this chapter in particular. How genuinely heroic and caring these Space Marines can be, and how refreshing it was to see such genuine care in this setting, and how that care can be exploited by the chapter's enemies. The Dragons are a loyalist chapter of Space Marines, but due to them being a product of the 21st Founding, also known as the Cursed Founding, they tend to be looked down upon by their fellow Astartes. Their lack of codex compliance and their embracing of their natural mutations not earning them many friends either. Some members of the Black Dragons have gray skin that resembles the texture of scales, bone claws that are sometimes retractable and sometimes not, and can grow a variety of horns out of the top of their head, requiring them to augment their gauntlets and helmets to accommodate them. They believe that although these mutations make them look like monsters, they help them better serve the Emperor, and thus their battle cry is fire and bone. And there are also Black Dragons who are completely devoid of any mutations. These are the ones whose gene seed is often taken and sent in for tithing. And they do sometimes feel a little left out from the rest of their chapter, as the Boneclaw mutations are especially venerated among their ranks, as they help them to better serve the Emperor in bringing death to his enemies. However, when equipped with a flamer, they can still provide the fire, so they're not completely left out of the battle cry. Among the most prestigious units of this chapter are the Dragon Claws, the shock infantry of the chapter, equipped with jump packs and adamantium sheathing for their bone claws. And in the novel Death of Antagonis, we get to see the Dragon Claws fight Chaos Raptors, which is probably one of the coolest things that happens in any Warhammer novel. The Black Dragons are a fleet-based chapter, often fighting on the fringes of the Imperium, recruiting from the polluted backwater worlds nobody remembers exists, and the relationship with their parent legion is largely unknown. However, the Dragons are considered allies of the Crimson Fists, having fought alongside them during the Third War for Armageddon, and they were accepted as a part of the Indominus Crusade, where the chapter was convinced to adopt Primaris Marines among their ranks, which to me is kind of silly considering how much they venerate their mutations. Primaris Marines basically strip away everything that makes a Space Marine chapter unique to begin with, by making them perfect and stable gene seed-wise. But whatever, at least they still exist in the modern tabletop. The novel Death of Antagonis follows two members of the Black Dragons chapter, Sergeant Volos, who leads a squad of Dragon Claws, and Sergeant Toharon, who leads a squad of General Infantry. The second company of the Black Dragons are responding to a distress call from the planet of Antagonis. A zombie outbreak has consumed the majority of the population. However, unlike typical Nurglite plague zombies, they're acting very strange, completely ignoring the presence of the Space Marines and solely trying to hunt down the survivors of the planet. Toharon, his squad, and a battalion of guardsmen are trying to lead the survivors out of the capital city, fighting off the now enraged zombies the best that they can. And a few more irregularities start popping up. Some of the zombies are found to be using tools, which is not common among Nurglite plague zombies. And some of the guardsmen seem to be turning into zombies without being bitten or infected. And while all of this is happening, the story is being told from Toharon's perspective, where he is genuinely distressed at how hard it is to keep the civilians alive. He's even carrying the daughter of the planetary governor on his back, promising her he'll keep her alive through all of this. And as the Black Dragons and the guardsmen are leading the civilians out of the city, they're rescued by a squad of Dragon Claws led by Volos, who buys this makeshift band just enough time to retreat to a fortress monastery on top of a mountain, a temporary safe haven for this band of survivors. And while both Marines are portrayed as generally heroic and trying to save the civilians, Mr. Annandale does go out of his way to contrast the two as well, with Toharon himself referring to Volos and the other Dragonclaws as monsters, as he is entirely devoid of the bone mutations, and is regarded as something of a pretty boy by some of the other members of the chapter. Meanwhile, Volos is a monster among monsters. He was the size of a Primaris Marine before they existed and had devil-like horns jutting out of the top of his head. Gray skin and black eyes. He almost looks like a wingless prince of chaos undivided. And to no one's surprise, Space Marines like Volos running around would capture the attention of the Inquisition, which is where I have to introduce the two other most important characters of the story. The Inquisitor Werner Ledinger, who will be portrayed by this fellow for the sake of this video, and Canoness Satheno, a woman who slew her entire order of Sisters of Battle after they fell to chaos. While Ledinger was originally assuming that Satheno would be on his side, the two end up very different factors in the story, pulling the Black Dragon's chapters into two very different directions. Ledinger viewing Marines as Toharon as proof that the Black Dragons can be redeemed if they begin purging their mutants, and Satheno embracing Volos and the Dragonclaws, viewing them as necessary monsters in service of the Emperor. And it is actually Satheno who discovers what the infection on Antagonis actually is. It is a psychological parasite known as Doubtworm. And the people who appear to be zombies but refuse to attack the Black Dragons were in the early stages of infection. And the people who seemed normal but were just desperate to get off-world to escape the infection were in the late stages. And once this is discovered, they begin entering their final metamorphosis, where they all start merging together into giant multi-eyed worms. Since this is an Imperium world, the population is so big that the worms all fuse together into one multi-continent-sized monstrosity that requires the planet to be exterminatus. And this event breaks Toharon. He becomes obsessed with the concept of purity following this, creating his own small faction within the chapter known as the Disciples of Purity, all at the encouragement of Inquisitor Ledinger. The events of Antagonis were all a distraction, a scheme plotted by a former Imperial Cardinal named Nasun turned worshipper of Tzeentch, who had orchestrated a chaos rebellion on the hive world of Agi Mortis, disguising it as a righteous rebellion against traitors to the Emperor, using his personal band of Chaos Space Marines known as the Swords of Epiphany to bolster the morale of the rebels. While I don't have any art to show you what these guys look like, they are described as being a sickly mockery of the Emperor's gold. It seems to pollute the very light and air around them with its presence. But this too is a distraction, and as Volos himself points out at one point in the story, the Black Dragons are winning every conflict with the Swords of Epiphany, but clearly losing their war. And while the Black Dragons are fighting the Chaos Space Marines, they are also dealing with an internal power struggle between Toharon and Volos. As over the events of the story, Toharon is promoted to captain of the Second Company, and begins placing his fellow Disciples of Purity into positions of power they have not earned within the company, causing many of the mutated members of the company and the veterans to rally around Volos, who many of them believe should have been captain next. Death of Antagonis is genuinely one of the best written and most tense Warhammer 40k novels I've ever engaged with. And from here I would like to read a passage about a particular manufactorum on Agi Mortis to really go into how great the prose in the story is. The following excerpt is from chapter 16 of Death of Antagonis. If hell had nightmares, Concordant Hill was one of them. Even after the exodus of Agi Mortis's ruling elite, the Concordant retained its force. It was a machine of unstoppable momentum. It was a machine too big, too integrated, too self-contained, and too horrific to kill. And this is in reference to a manufactorum built on top of what was once a mountain, surrounded in a sea of its own toxic byproduct. a manufactorum that is still operating even though the planet is in a scale of widespread civil war, where many of its workers are creating components to machines the Imperium can no longer manufacture as a whole, simply discarding these products around their facility. It's a sight so shocking that it genuinely shapes almost everyone's faith in the Imperium when they see it, including Canonus Atheno. And this is also where Volos fully embraces his role as the Emperor's monster, sending the rebels who still believe they are loyal to the Imperium into a frenzy to destroy the Chaos Cultists of the Hive World, and essentially condemning the Second Company of the Black Dragons to a state of civil war. There are many other twists and turns I'm just going to gloss over for the sake of encouraging others to read this book. Physical copies are running for a pretty outrageous sum of money on the secondhand market right now, so I wouldn't recommend that. But if you can find a digital copy for a good price, I'd say it's well worth the read. Volos and Toharon are both genuinely interesting and compelling characters. And even though you may find yourself disagreeing with Toharon, you can understand where his logic is coming from. And he does have a pretty heavy-handed authority figure in the Imperium telling him that he's doing the right thing. And since this is a Warhammer story, pretty much nobody has a happy ending. Toharon dies a mutant, and Volos is forced to sacrifice thousands of civilians to destroy an ancient weapon. Feeling proud that he can serve the Emperor as his personal monster and feeling disgusted at the amount of innocent blood on his hands. Just another day in the 41st millennium. And with that, I'd like to say thank you guys for watching. Likes and comments are always appreciated, and I'm always open to suggestions from you guys. If you read the book, let me know what you thought about it and what you think about the Black Dragons as a whole. Alright, that's all I gotta say for now. You guys have a good one, you hear? Or else.